Hey, welcome back to my channel on just about everything. Okay, not everything. Well, welcome back to another video by Mike on auto maintenance. If you've subscribed to my channel, you see that I do a number of things. Auto maintenance on a VW, auto maintenance on a Pathfinder. Also, I have a wonderful video on a Callaway golf club. You might want to check that out. Okay, so today we're going to do the transmission service on a 2017 Nissan Pathfinder. So it's a little early, most people would say. 2017. I do a lot of driving, you see. So I've already actually got 112,000 miles, but I had the transmission serviced by the dealer last time. Did it at 60,000 miles. Now I'm going to do it at about 112 because about 120 is when it should be done again. So we're going to do the CVT fluid. This has a CVT transmission and a filter. So let's go take a look at the parts. The transmission dipstick. To have or not to have? Doesn't this look a lot like it might be a transmission dipstick? Well, here's the thing. It sort of is, and at the same time, it isn't. So you're curious, what the hell is this thing? How do I open this up? There must be something down in here. Take a small screwdriver. There's a small tab down inside. Here's the thing, is you have to get it to this side of the tab and then push it that way. Does that make sense? So you got to get it in here, you push it back. Usually do this with two hands. So anyway, the great thing about this is when you get this open, here, let me open it and then show you. So you get this open, what you're trying to do is you're trying to release this tab that you see in here from this piece of metal right here that holds it in place. Interestingly enough, when you open it up, no dipstick. No stick at all. Transmissions are sealed units for the most part. This one came with a dipstick at some point, right? They don't sell them anymore with a dipstick, so you can't check your transmission fluid level right here. Isn't that stupid? Isn't that stupid? There's a place for a dipstick, there's a cap, and there is no stick. What the hell is that? So your basic transmission service necessity, a drip pan. You got to catch all that transmission fluid in something. The dealer says that this is a 6-quart capacity transmission, so I have here an 11-quart drip pan. So I will empty it into there. This is the fill pump. Because these transmissions are sealed units, there is a fill hole down there and you have to pump it in to the fill hole. You can't just pour it down the dipstick like you do in the old days. This transmission does have a filter. The filter is external, which means that it is not underneath the transmission pan. So you don't have to drop the pan to get at the filter. Ideally, I would like to drop the pan. Today I don't have the facilities to do that, so the dealer service, when I inquired, the dealer service calls for draining and filling the fluid. So I'm actually taking it one step further and replacing this filter. And this is a CVT transmission, so I have from the Nissan dealer the genuine Nissan CVT, and this particular transmission requires an NS3 fluid, so I've got the CVT fluid from Nissan NS3. Tried finding this fluid made by anyone else, completely impossible. Had to buy it at the dealer. No one makes an NS3 compatible fluid. So I drove the car here, so it has a couple miles, warm up the transmission just a little bit. I don't want the transmission really hot like I've been driving it all day. I also don't want it cold because it's been sitting all night, so it's worked out pretty well. Again, I don't have the facilities here to do the pan. I can't drop the pan. Ideally, doing a transmission service, dropping the pan is like a no-brainer. The dealer doesn't even do it. I asked, they said they just drain the fluid out the drain hole and fill it in the fill hole, and that's all they do. So I know I'm at least meeting that standard. And then I'm doing the filter also. There is an external filter in this vehicle, and I'm going to do the external filter. So let's get underneath and take a look at what we find under there. Oh, and why am I wearing the crazy hat? Yeah, it's a little chilly in here. It's not quite as warm as, having the heater running. So a little chilly today. Okay, so I'm underneath the car, and here's the transmission pan. This is the drain plug, and go over here to the transmission. Try and get the camera in the right place. There we go. There's the fill plug. I don't know, I can get better lighting on that. That's the fill plug. So you've got the drain plug, the fill plug, and then the filter. That filter I showed you is inside this housing right here. So you're going to take out the 4 screws, 4 bolts. You got 1, 2, 3, and then one on the back side. And underneath this housing right here is the transmission filter. So they call it external because it's not in the drain pan. You don't have to drop the pan to get to the filter. But it's not external like an oil filter, you just unscrew it. So I'm going to need 2 hands for this. First I'm going to drain the fluid. Then I'm going to remove the housing for the filter, and I'll replace the filter. Then I will put the drain plug back in after I've cleaned it, because it'll probably have some small metal fibers on it, and those should be cleaned off. I'll put the drain plug back in and open up the fill and start to fill it. These are sealed units, so when you put the transmission fluid in, you have to put it in through the fill plug, and then when it starts dripping, you have to actually start the car and run it and continue filling it. And that's a bit of a process in itself. But those are essentially the parts. Whether or not you want to attempt this on your own, well, so whether you want to try this on your own or not, well, that's up to you. Filling the transmission requires a little bit of expertise. You have to fill the transmission, then when it starts coming out the fill hole, you have to start the vehicle and run it while you continue to fill the transmission with the transmission fluid. Keeping in mind that when I say transmission in this particular vehicle, I mean CVT fluid, because CVT is not the same as transmission. You do not go to the local auto parts store and buy transmission fluid and put it in your CVT. You do not do that. Okay? So, you want to do this by yourself? Good luck. You don't want to do it by yourself? Take it to the dealer, transmission service place, have a mechanic do it. Putting the fluid back in requires you to run the transmission, bring it to a certain operating temperature, and continue to fill it until it kind of just drips, just a drip, 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 little bit coming out at the required temperature as indicated by the manufacturer. So it is a little bit of a thing. But I did show you where the filter goes. I showed you there is a filter. I showed you the CVT fluid, the drain, and the fill hole. Now it's in your hands. Thanks for watching. I loosened the fill hole and started the vehicle so I could see if any was dripping out to see what the fluid level was. And the fluid level seemed to be, maybe a little shy of where it should be. And one thing about CVT fluid is supposed to be green, not red like ATF. Well, this is looking a little more like brown. So, has a slight green tint to it. This looks more brown than it does green, so this is definitely in need of a change. All right, here's the old stuff. Here's the filter that was in the transmission. Well, it's an external filter and, semantics. It's an external filter, right? So under that housing was this, looking pretty ugly. I don't know if that was ever changed. I had the transmission service by the dealer at 60,000 miles. but the maintenance manual says change the fluid. Doesn't say anything about filters. So I opted to change this filter. The transmission fluid looks more like motor oil. Of course, it's in a dark pan and it's dark in here, so. But it didn't look as bluish green as it should, which you would expect after some use. It's got about 50,000 miles on this fluid, and so I completed the fluid, CVT fluid change, and the filter. Now the filter was actually a little easier than I expected. I was unsure about removing that housing. I had never done that before on a Nissan Pathfinder. Actually, it came out surprisingly easy. I'll give you a tip though. The hard part is going to be there's on that housing there are 4 bolts, and there's a bolt up top, and you can't see that bolt. You can only feel it. Okay, now as a tip, it's a 10 millimeter, okay, 10 millimeter head. You're going to need a 10 millimeter wrench, because a small wrench is the only thing you're going to fit up there. If you could get your vehicle on a lift, you'd be doing great. If you're going to be lying on your back to do this and you're underneath it, it's a bit of a trick, because you've got to get it out, which is possible because you can feel it, but when you have to put it back in, you can't see the hole. So you're up there with your fingers, feeling around, trying to get that bolt back in that hole correctly, because it has to go in the right way. So it is a bit of a trick. Now also, if you decide to do that, there is an O-ring washer type thing. Now it's a mix, right? It seems like it's part cork or some fibrous material and part rubber O-ring, and they're bonded together. And that is inside the housing. And you can get that from the dealer. You know, just tell them you need the seal that goes inside the housing for the transmission filter. And it's like $1 or something, you know, it's ridiculously cheap. They didn't have one in stock. I reused the one I had. It looked like it would go back in just fine. I didn't see any problems with it, you know, just cleaned up the housing and put it back in. So I have a new filter, new CVT fluid, and you know, it could have been worse. It wasn't really that bad. Good luck.